I know EXP is doing a lot of work doing virtual events. Can you break down a little bit about what that entails and some of the work that goes into throwing some of these virtual gatherings?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I gotta say, this past year, working with EXP, it's been quite the wild ride, just innovating and adapting to the environment that we're in. Honestly, man, like the first thing I'll say is that a virtual event, it still is an event. And the way that I like to describe an event is that it's a gathering of people in time and space. Put together a virtual event, it's still a gathering of people in time and space. However, it's not physical space that we're gathering in, it's now this virtual, digital cyberspace. I just like to start there because, you say virtual events and people are kind of like, oh man, what does that even mean? Well, you're still gathering people together in time. It's still an event. The venue just looks a little bit different. So, with that, you've got like a spectrum, right, of how complicated that can be. So, just like an event, you on one side of the spectrum, you've got, if we're talking virtual, you've got like a video call, like your classic Zoom call or Google Hangouts or whatever. But then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got like a virtual version of a full-on music festival or a conference or trade show. And on that side of things, that's where things get kind of complicated. But ultimately, you're still gathering people together in time and space, but with virtual, it's just totally changed. So it's still a gathering of people in time and space. But like I said, the space just looks a little bit different. And in this past year of putting together these virtual experiences, it really has expanded the scope of how we think about gathering people together because we're now no longer bound to like having to be together in the physical space to have a shared experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you kind of laid out the landscape really well because you're right. It is a changing time where I think maybe a year ago people were looking at virtual events, looking at virtual festivals as something that was really weird, really odd. But now that we're seeing it's kind of customary. People are like used to it. And I think it might stick like this for a long time. We can talk about the implications of the future going forward, but for now, could you break down a little bit of the tools and the logistics that EXP uses to host some of these bigger and more intensive virtual events?
Absolutely. So, yeah, on the more complex side of the virtual spectrum, what you have at its core is something that looks more like a television broadcast than your typical live event. So, it looks a lot like a television broadcast, just with beefed up, enhanced technologies and methodologies for the audience participation and engagement, and the ability to include people in the broadcast that aren't necessarily there in studio.
Yeah.
So like a good example is this awards show that we did for a global marketing company that we work with. And so for that, we set up a studio, like a broadcast studio at their headquarters here in Washington State. So we brought a full camera crew. We had a team of Zoom technicians, and then the video crew. We had an audio team, and the layout of this event was that the executives were the hosts of the award show, so they were live in studio on camera, all dressed up, and then some of the nominees for the awards, if they were local, they came into the studio, and so as they were called, they would come up on stage, on the live camera. But the majority of the nominees, like I mentioned, it's a global company, so they've got employees all over the world. And so those nominees all called in via Zoom. So there was a screen on camera behind the hosts that would display various content throughout the show. But during the awards portion, it would show the Zoom room of that award category, put up on the screen. And then this whole show was live streamed through the Vimeo live platform. And then that video was embedded on a custom branded website that we put together for them that was password protected and all of that. All of the company employees, they received an invitation to the virtual award show. They were instructed to go to the link at, a certain time at a certain day. And then they get to this custom branded website with the live stream embedded on that page. And then there was also a chat embedded as well. So all the employees tuning in from all over the world could chat with each other as they were watching this live presentation hosted by the executives live in studio, calling in the award nominees from all over the world via Zoom.
Wow, that's really interesting that you kind of are using all of these technologies, whether they be physical or digital. Like you said, it's kind of like old school TV broadcast where you have cameras, where you have soundboards, where you have lighting. But now we're involving all of these like modern technologies. It's like web building, embedding abilities for the people in what would be the virtual crowd to communicate with each other in the form of a chat. I think that is really interesting to really dive into how we kind of expanding on these old methods and using these new technologies. So it sounds like EXP is doing some like really groundbreaking work in that regard.
It's pretty fun, man. I mean, each opportunity, when we go into discovery phase with the client and we're asking them what kind of experience they're trying to create, there's so many factors that we have to balance. Like we have to start with COVID, health and safety is the first priority. So we have our just like honest concern for health and safety. And then we also have the government regulations that we have to abide by. And then we have a whole set of technologies that are available to us. But really, the methodology behind it and how you engineer this experience that's the fun part because it's like pure innovation right now because this stuff really hasn't been done before, at least at this scale.
Yes. Yeah, it is really interesting. And I'm sure we could hypothesize over what it's going to look like, but no one really knows. But being a professional in your field, I feel like your opinion is very valid. I agree that not going to see people lose interest in going to in-person events, in-person festivals, in-person concerts, but I don't think we're necessarily going to lose all these things that we've become accustomed to. I don't think virtual events are totally going to go away. So in your opinion, what do you think are the implication of these technologies that you're developing and that many others are developing going forward and moving on with?
Yeah, man. So right now, the hot buzzword in the industry is hybrid events, which is basically just this merging of virtual and live in person. And so hybrid, I think, is part of the um the road to getting back to a fully opened up society. So like as the restrictions lighten up, it's happening now. Like we're beginning to be able to come back together. But it's in limited capacity. So in this transition period, we've got the ability to gather a smaller number of people together. And so the hybrid piece will be bringing in who we can, but then creating a virtual experience for those who can't join us in person. But then beyond the transition period, I think that all this new tech and methodology behind creating a virtual experience is going to live on in both the concert festival world as well as the corporate setting. Um, in the corporate setting, a lot of these events, like an all hands meeting for, say, that global marketing company that I was talking about, they do an annual event each year in the beginning of the year where they bring in people from all over the world that work for them. But budget and logistics don't permit them to truly bring everybody. And so with this virtual technology, I think a lot of companies are going to start implementing these pieces to make their content available to a wider audience that previously, budget and logistics wouldn't permit for that. But then in the concert and festival world, people all over the world want to go to EDC Vegas, or they want to go to Shambhala in Canada, or these high profile festivals, Coachella, Bonnaroo. But not everybody can afford to pay $500 for a ticket and another 500 for the flight, and then you know lodging and food and all that. It's expensive. So I r- I really think that a lot of festivals will probably start creating a virtual offering at a highly discounted rate, because now that'll give fans across the globe an opportunity to tune in, and that creates an additional revenue stream for festivals and promoters in general.